You are listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
Hi, I'm your co-host, Mark.
And I'm your other co-host, Billy.
I'm your other co-host, Josh. Still feels weird like having three co-hosts, but
Yes.
here we are. And we are joined by the director behind the Horrific Hope official selection, looky-loo, Mr. Jason Zink.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being here.
So,
Mark, you're the found footage guy, so you kick us off there.
looky-loo, what was your original idea and concept for it?
So that's a good question. So when we started, we actually weren't planning on making looky-loo. We had another found footage idea that dealt with like this couple that were vloggers, and they take a van into the woods and they mess with something that they shouldn't, and it kind of winds up this fun like Evil Dead 2 style thing in the woods. But as we were testing the cameras and walking around, like I was walking around at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning by myself, just filming down these alleys and testing low light, we started to feel like that in and of itself was really creepy and compelling footage, and then started piecing it together. So ultimately, like what you see is pretty close to what we had envisioned once we came up with the idea, Nolan and I. But we also, you should know that we plan it to be a trilogy. And so really the arc is like 1 through 3. So I hope we make it that far because we have it planned out really well. And I think with an elevated sequel for part 2, part 1 will almost become the film within the film. So I think some people, we know it's like a weird movie and can be a hard sell. So I think when part 2 is done, we'll hopefully wow people and they'll go back and watch and appreciate part 1. That's my hope.
Yeah, I will say out of every film that I've programmed this year for Horrific Hope, this is the film I'm most interested to see how it will play over with audiences. Because not only is this the first found footage film we've done as a festival, but yeah, so thanks for popping the cherry on that one. But this is a very polarizing movie. Like when you had said that initially, was after submission, I was kind of like, like I feel like everyone says that, and like I got to the end of it, and I was like, all right, this is gonna be this, and then there's another film that's gonna close out the our block this our festival this year called The Coffee Table, that is also gonna be a very polarizing film. I'm very curious to just kind of see like what is the experience been with audiences so far, like what is the feedback you guys have gotten? Are you guys finding it to be polarizing, or like what has the response been overall?
I think we're definitely finding it to be polarizing. It's weird. It's like I feel like almost everybody has said that they like it. They kind of couldn't turn away. You know, it's unsettling. Some people said it makes them feel gross, but they just like couldn't stop watching it. And ultimately that's kind of what we wanted. But the frustrating thing is I think that it is such a weird movie. Like it demands a lot of the audience, I guess I'd say. So we've had some people that are like, we think it's cool, but we don't really know how an audience is going to react to it. So we're going to pass. And we really wonder how many people actually watch the whole movie, because, you know, going back to Mark's question, a part of it too is that we didn't want to start at a 10. Like we didn't want this to just be boom, he's a serial killer, and now you watch him kill all these people, kind of like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer or something like that. We thought, what if it's a guy who's just documenting the world around him, and he's kind of discovering that he's a killer as we are discovering it right alongside him. But that could be a hard sell too. You know, a lot of people just want to see blood and guts right from the get-go. So yeah, you got to commit to the movie, I feel like.
Because the way I took it was you were looking at the world through the eyes of a peeping Tom that went too far.
Sure. Yeah. And a part of what Nolan really liked about the idea is kind of holding up a mirror to like true crime junkies and making them kind of question or talk about like, this isn't fun. Like we, as a society, everybody's obsessed with true crime now, and they listen to podcasts and watch these docuseries and stuff. But like the reality of it is a nightmare, and it's not very fun. And this feels, in my opinion, this feels very real to what would be happening. And that was kind of our like conflict when making it. Like, what would seem more cinematic, it doesn't make sense because it's this guy who's not really a filmmaker. He just has a camera and starts documenting the world around him, and then gets creepier and creepier, descends down the rabbit hole. So yeah, in part 2, it's much more elevated. It feels much more like a movie, but it's still going to be in that found footage style. It's all going to be kind of through his camera lens that you see things.
I was trying to see if Billy wanted to jump in there, but
I was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
I thought their video went out. So
Yeah.
no, Mark has hit on the main 2 points I was going to ask about, and just the escalation, like you brought up, of first it went from peeping Tom to voyeur to then the violence and everything. I know you said you switched the story a little bit. What made you start working through the violence, like starting slow, coming up? Did anything like trigger that to show that that's what you wanted to do, for it to go that slow, and then all of a sudden, like the escalation of, oh, I like this?
Yeah. So Nolan was doing a whole lot of research on serial killers, and to be fair, when I say like holding up a mirror to like society and true crime junkies, I also love true crime. So I'm one of those people who's like guilty. But we were doing some research, and I listened to this podcast where they talked about a killer who admitted to breaking into over 100 homes while people were home at night and looking through their things without ever hurting anyone. And those people, for the most part, still have no idea that he was ever there. And that's what we were kind of we were like, man, that is really unsettling, really freaky. and so we thought like, okay, and to be fair, like we also shot several scenes that you don't get to see in the movie. Like in our logic, there's more kills, there's more breaking in, there's a even smoother escalation, I'd say. But this is his edited film. He sees himself as an artist, not just a peeping Tom murderer. So in his mind, he's creating the best movie ever. But then we also had to like think realistically, it wouldn't be the best movie ever. Like sometimes you see found footage movies where it's almost too good. It's like, well, this doesn't make sense. You could tell that it's scripted. Sometimes they shoot with other cameras. And one of the other festivals that we're in, the guys interviewed me on a podcast, and he called it hard format. And I had never heard that before, but I think that he's right, that's kind of what it is. It's like, it sticks to it so, strictly that it might be a hard sell for people.
Yeah, that's why, like I said, I'm really curious to see how this is going to play over with our audience. So we've known each other for a couple years now because of Genre Blast, and I got about halfway through this film and I texted you and I was like, I am very unsettled right now. And I think this is like one of the first films that has like done that for me in a while. Whereas like we've had, other writers and directors in the past that have made found footage films, and I've just been kind of like, this found footage really isn't my cup of tea. But there's, like you said, like there's something that's really, it feels almost like a train to where you really have to follow and like stick with this movie, because for one, it's largely has no dialogue. So you really are like glued to what is on the screen. And then as you're sticking with it, like all of these like really heinous things happen. Can you kind of talk about the, creating that unsettling environment and creating it without dialogue?
Yeah, I mean, it was really difficult, to be honest. And a part of what was really difficult was like, luckily the thing I like about this kind of movie is it's kind of like segmented. Like you can shoot a scene or a series of scenes with like one character. And if something doesn't work, it's a lot easier than in a typical narrative to go back and reshoot something. So a part of this process that has actually really, it's been like kind of fun and liberating, but it's also been way more work than we expected, is we've gone back and forth with, I mean, there's probably been like over 100 cuts of this film. And we will sit there and watch the entire thing and then be like, okay, that's not working. Let's go back and reshoot, or let's shoot with somebody entirely different. Like, and so it's weird. It's like the movie kind of deceives people, I think, because I think some people will think, oh, they just like walked around and filmed with a camera, and instead everything's actually really meticulously planned out. And it was a real big pain. But yeah, that's a lot of our pacing and how it worked. It's just through the editing process and the fact that I'm an includer. Like, I don't pride myself as an editor, you know, like I want to just direct, but since I don't have money, I got to do it myself. And so a lot of times I'm like including the other cast members and the crew, being like, especially Nolan, I lean on him a lot. Like, here's a new edit of this. Does it look better? Does it look worse? Do we need to reshoot something? There was just a lot of back and forth to get the pacing to where it is, which we think is right, but maybe some people would disagree.
I think it just kind of adds to the polarizing appeal of this movie. And if you guys want to check it out, you guys can check it out during our In Commodus block. That is going to also feature the East Coast premiere of In Your Head, the world premiere of Eat Me, the Virginia premiere of Not Him, and will be capped off by Looky-loo. It is at 1:40 p.m. on August 6th. You guys can click the link in the description below to buy tickets and see this film and find out what side of the fence you're on. Do you love it? Do you hate it? You know, so all right.
And it's okay. It's okay. Like,
yeah,
we made it knowing it's not going to be for everybody. And we're hoping that part 2 is closer to being for everybody. I still don't think it'll be exactly that way. But wait, did you say August 6th?
April 6th. So
I could have sworn
he said August 6th.
Okay,
April 6th. April 6th at Horrific Hope Film Festival.
Damn, because I was like, wait, it's in August? I thought it was April. Like, I'll be there.
No, April 6th.
Okay.
So, but one thing I will tell the listeners and everything is the movie does start slow, which is perfect for the way this movie is. So you have to give it time to develop. Don't walk away or distract yourself at that point, because it's worth the watch. It's one of those, once you get into it, it's in your face and you can't look away. It's like a train wreck.
Yeah.
In a good way. In a good way.
No.
Is it really in a good way?
Yeah. Well, it's like you want to watch it at that point, not that, yeah, whatever, it's bad. It's one of those, dude, I just got to see what's going on, what's going to happen.
Thank you, Billy. I appreciate that. Like, because we are, you know, we're nervous that some people haven't even watched the movie. Like, they've just rejected it outright because in the first couple minutes, I mean, it's just those observations around, you know? So it could really feel like you're just watching like somebody walk through a mall for an hour and a half. Like, that's what's ahead of you. So, and we really went back and forth on that. We even originally didn't have the little FBI text at the beginning. And it just started with the very first shot opening up. And we thought, man, like, maybe we need to at least give them some idea that if this is evidence, there's something for it to be evidence of. you know, something's coming later. Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys get your tickets to go see it. Not only is Looky-loo, like Billy said, I thought it is a very it's a train wreck from start to finish. But you got to stick with it. I promise you, it is. I'm excited to experience this with an audience. By the end of the day, so this and all the shorts that make up this again are just incredible. Tickets are in the show notes below, but we're gonna take a quick commercial break, and when we get back, we're gonna talk about the Omen 3.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Abyss Gazing. We are continuing on our series into the Omen, which the more that we do these movies, the more I am really not wanting Mark to be in charge of series anymore. Phantasm was fine. This is another story, but we're talking about the final conflict, which stars Sam Neill. This is the quote unquote end of the trilogy, but we know that there are 3 other movies. So this was the first time.
There's one more sequel, a remake, and then the prequel that's coming out.
Yes, I said 3 more movies.
But it's
Mark
not
can't count.
a big technical. Don't be a jerk.
Get out of here, Mark. What'd you think of this movie?
It's I liked it better than 2. It's much more coherent than 2 and focused. 2 was all over the place, focusing on a bunch of different characters. This one primarily focused on Damien for the most part. And a journalist.
Yeah.
Was the other one. So I liked a lot of the nods that they had back to the original and the last one. How they find the daggers and all that stuff and make the reference about the daggers. So I thought it was better than 2. I still like the original the best.
I think that's going to be the general consensus kind of moving forward for this one.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with Mark. I like this one better than 2. Of course, the original is the best. But this one does basically what we were saying last time, where he didn't just jump into it at the very beginning of the movie. He owned already who he was. It's not like within that 2 seconds of I'm this person and, okay, I'm this person. This one he owned it. Yeah, exactly. So this one he owned it the whole time, and he was over the Thorn Industries, basically could run anything he wanted. So it gave it more storyline and power for him to show the power he can use to do what he wants to do.
Yeah. Before I let Jason go, I just want to say this real quick. I want to push back against something that Mark said. I think this movie is mostly more cohesive than the last one, but it becomes a little bit disjointed as it approaches the last act. I feel like it kind of fell apart for me personally, but that's just me. Overall, it was a decent political thriller. Jason, what did you think?
Yeah, I think I agree with all of you. Josh, I did feel like the end kind of is abrupt and a little anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Maybe a little silly, especially how many biblical quotes can we stand? But the main thing, I love Sam Neill, and I'm sure you guys agree. Without Sam Neill, I don't think I would like this movie at all. I just took a couple of quick notes, and I wrote the suicide scene is the only scene I actually think is compelling in the entire movie. But I love Sam Neill enough that I tolerate watching the rest of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of all finding out that Sam Neill did a lot of movies, a lot of horror that we kind of all, I think, overlooked over the years.
Yes.
I hadn't watched In the Mouth of Madness until just a few months ago. I had never watched it. That movie is so good.
Good.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed it.
Part of the Carpenter End of the World trilogy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's The Thing. And I saw Prince of Darkness for the first time about a month or 2 ago.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and In the Mouth of Madness is his End of the World trilogy.
If you need more Sam Neill conversations, go check out our episodes on Possession, which also released in 1981. It's probably one of my favorite episodes we've done so far in 100 episodes. And also Event Horizon, which we covered. The true Hellraiser in space.
Event Horizon is so good. And I still find it amusing that it was based on Warhammer lore.
That's crazy.
Possession's another one
Crazy.
That movie's so good. I hunted that one down for a long time on VHS. I finally found a copy, but that's another movie that I didn't watch when I was younger, and I've been a genre junkie since I was a little kid, and I'm kind of shocked that at this age I'm still discovering not new things, but things that I missed or never heard of that I love. You know, that's definitely up there.
Yeah, Possession is one of those movies that I think it's so hard to explain, and we talked about it in the episode because it's like one of the weirdest made movies where like the crew is from like one country, they shot it in another country, they have like actors from other countries, the writers like from other, and it's just such a weird international movie. And but I think here, to go off of what you're saying, Jason, like he has this like charisma and this like fearlessness that I think really kind of made Damien a compelling character, whereas I feel like in the second one that was something that they'd kind of missed. You know, they're like, oh yeah, he's the Antichrist, you know, we're gonna, you know, kind of just make him like kind of somewhat of a brat. And I think they've really missed out on the ability to like develop him, because like I've seen other movies where you can make kids compelling characters and have adults really connect to them on, you know, an emotional level, or have them click with that. And I feel like they've really missed the bar on doing that, whereas I feel like they really made up with it here. And I think a large part of that comes from having Sam Neill in this role.
Sam Neill makes Damien believable.
Yes.
He really made Damien a believable character in this one. He has the attitude and the look and the portrayal to make the role, basically.
Some of it reminds me of Devil's Advocate. I mean, obviously, Omen 3 came first, but yeah, I was getting that Al Pacino vibe, you know, standing up in his window and like kind of controlling what's happening down below, especially when on the bridge scene when the horse is bucking and throws the guy over the bridge. That kind of gave me the same vibe.
Yeah, and I liked too. I think one of the things that they got really well in this one is like they kind of hinted at the last one, where like the first one establishes that like his adopted family is like not very religious, but like he kind of has like an exploration in the second one. And the thing that, you know, it has biblical ties, so I'm gonna address it, but like when you read like scriptures specifically pertaining to Lucifer or Satan or the devil, whatever you want to call him, he's very smart, he's very cunning. And I think that this film was able to really kind of explore that. Like there are really awesome scenes where like, you know, he knows of the seven knives. You know, I think that's really dope. I think that like he's like aware. I think it's really smart that they made him aware of like his like his following, and the fact that like, you know, the quote unquote Nazarene rebirth had already happened. And like there are quite a lot of things that I'm really glad that they articulated him being smart, because it feels very much on brand for the devil, you know.
He also, it seems like he's so confident, you know, he's got so much like pride in himself that even though he knows these people are out there like hunting him, he doesn't ever seem scared, and he doesn't seem like he's gonna back down, like no matter what. I mean, those two guys show up at either end of the bridge.
He seems more arrogant than anything else.
That's fair.
And like you just said, the bridge scene, either end of the bridge, it's like, okay, whatever, bring it on. And I love the fact he just sits there and kind of smirks and then says, okay, get him. And all the hounds just go.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it's followed up with he goes back to the house, and I forget the little boy's name, but he's like, did you get a fox or whatever? And they do what's called a blooding. And he's like, well, can you blood me? And he's like, well, does this count? And the line that really got me was, it counts for me.
And there's a good chance that was human blood, not fox blood, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think without Sam Neill, this would have been a different movie altogether. I think he really does make the movie overall. I don't know anybody else that would have made it quite like he did.
Here's the thing about the Antichrist as a character and as a concept, though, is that the makings of a good leader, because he essentially has the disciples of the Watch, as is later revealed in the film. You need to have someone that is able to be really charismatic. And I think when you watch movies like Possession, or when you watch even more famous roles that he's done, like Jurassic Park, there is just a natural charisma that he's able to bring to these roles. He's still acting, and he still pops up. And I think that with him as an actor, there's just a natural level of charisma that he is able to lead this. This to us now, we're over 40 years separated from this movie, but I mean, this at the time being produced by Fox was considered to be a big budget film. And here you have a guy that I would argue is semi unknown at this time, because he doesn't really kind of hit his stride until Jurassic Park. And so I think it comes down to the fact that he is a guy of charisma, and that was how this film works as well as it does.
I don't think it's a case of he didn't hit his stride until Jurassic Park. I think he wasn't in anything that got him really mainstream noticed until Jurassic Park, which are two very different things.
Well, and the age plays a big factor, because I looked it up because we're talking so much about Sam Neill. I'm like, I wonder who else was considered for the role. And according to IMDb, it says Jack Nicholson, Marlon Brando, and Gene Hackman were all considered for the role, but they needed somebody, but they wanted somebody younger. And then somebody else suggested they take a look at Sam Neill.
And that's who he beat out for the role?
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, he needs a plaque for that one to put on his wall, because they were the big ones at that time period. They were the big names for just about every. And I couldn't actually imagine any of them actually doing it.
Mm-mm. No, especially this being set a year after The Shining, it would be really weird to see Jack Nicholson kind of take on a role like that. But also, Mark, to your point, I mean, he's a New Zealand-based actor, so I think a lot of the films that he was doing at this time really never made its way stateside. Possession had a huge controversy fronting it. There are two different cuts of the film, the one that we talked about last year, and
the one we talked about is the original cut.
Yes, and the American version, if you've never seen it, is like chopped to hell. It narratively makes no sense. It is a very weird conglomerate. Like, scenes are just like completely copy and pasted out of order. It is a wild movie. It's like a wild juxtaposition. But again, I think it's just him, like Jason was saying, like he got recommended. So, I think sometimes we see people from like other countries that kind of find their way into American films, and whether or not they're able to make an imprint and cross over to be an American actor or actress varies by case.
You're making me wonder which version I have on VHS.
Probably the American cut.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
If you have it, so the American cut is like 75 to 80 minutes. The uncut version, that is like you can find most streaming now, and it's the Umbrella did a fantastic release of it. That is the version that's closer to 2 hours. So depending on but if you found it, if it's a stateside thing release and it's under 90 minutes, then it's the US. It's
okay. I'll take a look as soon as we get off the call here.
Yeah. I know I've seen it on a couple different streaming services now. I know Shudder had it as an exclusive for a little while.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a crazy movie. It's such a crazy movie. It's all over the place.
I am so I'm kind of curious if you guys, how much you guys know about history and this fact. This is just a cool fact, but do you guys know why there is why 7 is considered the number of the knives that are used to kill Damien?
Well, that would be a no, dog.
No.
So In Hebrew, the number 7 actually signifies completion. So if somebody was to quote unquote kill the Antichrist with 7 knives, it would mean that the job is essentially complete.
Well, then they didn't complete the task. They failed.
That goes back to what Jason and I were saying about how this movie ended abruptly.
Yeah, and the Nazarene, I don't know. That ending just feels so corny to me.
Like, can we kind of address the Nazarene subplot of this movie? Because this movie, like, the first 2 movies, they talk about how the Antichrist is going to come from the world of politics, and we're kind of led to believe that this is going to be this like really triumphant chapter for the Damien story, and it's ultimately not. Where like you have that like it's the whole like, oh, the Antichrist or the regular Christ, the Nazarene, is going to be born again, and like entire second half of this movie is him like essentially trying to hunt down and kill the Nazarene because it's a whole thing of power for him. And it just this movie just kind of like, once you introduce that element of the story, that's where the film started to fall apart for me. I don't know if I'm the only one, but that's where it kind of like where the seam started to unravel.
Well, no, it made sense to me. It was just they excuse me. They kind of briefly glossed over the 7 years of war from Revelations and turmoil to okay, now the Christ has been born again and going to bring about peace. And they just kind of like glossed over it real quick in like 1 2-minute scene, 3-minute scene. And then he was, okay, we need to kill him. And that was the plot. I think if it had a little bit better writing to involve that storyline throughout, as opposed to, okay, this happened, now we need to do this, it would have been a little bit more coherent and fit a little better.
There's another detail from that scene that you're talking about where, because it's him and his advisor, they're having a conversation. He's just read this like passage from the Bible, and he talks about how like he had been at Thorn Industries for 7 years. Like this was his 7th year where like all of this stuff is taking event. Then he kind of goes on to kind of talk about, and like our entry to Thorn in this is like it's kind of talking about like the economic decay and like the the rate of poverty and kind of like what Thorn is doing to kind of combat that. So I just kind of thought that was interesting that they have these like very like little like notes that like mark what you're talking about, but it's very sloppily placed.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. If you're not paying attention and you're not looking for those notes, a lot of times you'll just miss them. I had to watch it a second time to catch some of those notes because I wasn't watching for those. I was watching just to watch it and see everything else. And the fact that they started focusing on the Nazarene versus the storyline of Damien, the knives, and him progressing and going more powerful and everything, that kind of took away from me too. Plus, babies and going after the babies, it's like it felt thrown together to me at that point.
Yeah, I think the chasing down, like trying to hunt down the babies, it's got that like Terminator, like just looking for every Sarah Connor in the phone book vibe. And it is kind of crazy because I've seen this movie before and I didn't remember that part of it. And I was like, damn, this is some dark stuff.
Well, like one of the most interesting elements of that entire subplot is like the disciples of the Watch, where like has that scene on the beach and you're getting to see like Damien is like entering into like his position as the Antichrist, like he's stepping into his destiny. And
Right.
that seemed like such a missed opportunity in terms of like story, because I'm like, man, like the idea of like the Antichrist is like such a fascinating story aspect. And like, given the fact that the first 2 have built it up that like he's going to come from the world of politics, and you're going to kind of get to see his like corruptness and like how how this is kind of like developing, and then they have that scene, and then it's like you never hear about the disciples of the watch before, you don't hear about them afterwards, and I'm like, bro, this just seems like such a weird thing to like throw in here. It's such a fascinating scene, and why are we not seeing more of this?
Yeah, and like especially back then, like there are so many scripts that would just like get butchered by the studio, or they would like, fire the original writer and bring in somebody else. So like you never know. I don't know anything about the behind the scenes of this movie, but it does kind of reek of like a few different, like too many hands being, making moves on that screenplay.
And on the disciples thing, if you're not paying attention, those little kids with the ball that throw it over the fence, they're actually part of the disciples. If you don't catch that, you don't realize that the disciples are still there. They're just little nods and not saying, hey, these are disciples. It's more of a, this is what's happening. That's why if you pay attention to when they look over the fence, they're just looking to see what happened, to see if they took care of it.
Yeah, I would have liked more story about and involved with the watch or whatever. That would have been interesting to see how they were involved, other than just a bunch of minions right there in like one scene. You could have painted them all yellow and given them glasses, and
we are going to steal the moon.
But
that's how it kind of came out. That's kind of how it came across to me. I would have liked to see more with them and more of what they actually do as a whole than just, okay, here's a quick scene. They're his lackeys. Okay, move on.
To Josh's point, that scene to me, I thought they would have really built off of that. That felt like the scene of, okay, we're here, what's going to happen now? And it basically went from we're here, what's going to happen now, to crash and burn to me.
I think that this film still welcomes in that conversation of the mental health struggle of legacy and like identity, because like it still feels like he, when he's having that conversation with his advisor, like he's reading going back to like him reading the Bible and like kind of deciphering like what this means. Like it seems like he is like kind of sure of it. And then there's another scene that I really love. It's probably my favorite scene in the movie, where he's walking through the park with the reporter chick, and he's just kind of seeing like all of these like activists that are just kind of like littered, and like how people are reacting to him being an activist. And the very last activist is actually a street preacher that's like talking about like the coming of like the Antichrist, and just kind of like how he's like glued, and like how it gives this imagery of like the Antichrist walking among us. But the way that like Sam Neill like plays that part, it just kind of seems like he's like, yes, like this is the here and the now, this is my reality. And it kind of almost seems like he doesn't necessarily want that reality, and he kind of goes back and forth. And that's just kind of what I took at it. But I think if it's a fascinating conversation to really consider where he stands in terms of like how this like title and like this destiny really affects him from a mental health perspective.
That's pretty cool reading. I mean, I think we could all probably relate to that. I even like, so much of my identity is wrapped up in my filmmaking. Like, I don't know where my life would be if I didn't go down this path. But there's also this weird like pressure that you feel releasing a new project, and like every time I get depressed about the movie stuff that's happening or not happening, I guess, it's like I always go back to like, oh, I think I'm just gonna quit making movies. Like, it's not worth this like strain on me. And then I start to feel guilty, like, but then I have to tell everybody that I quit, like that believed in me all this time, It's and ultimately I think I just can't quit, but it is a constant debate.
So on that line, and is it a case of you? a lot of people have the issue of their career becoming their identity. Is that the case with your filmmaking, or is it a case of it's more your passion and that's where you find your identity through?
Probably more the latter. I do think that a lot of my frustration stems from like I've never been able to make something that wasn't riddled with compromise, and that even includes not paying people what they deserve to be paid, myself included. But like my crew is usually like friends or acquaintances, you know, friends of friends, and usually they become my friends, but they're doing it because they're passionate as well, and they just want to make something together. But we still haven't found that level of success that we all dream of. And so then I feel this like guilt and pressure, like I want to keep going because this is my passion, but then I feel guilty when it doesn't work out exactly as we had hoped. Wow, we're gonna get into a therapy session on this. We could talk about this for hours.
No, dude, I feel that, man. And you know, that's something that I've struggled with definitely in the last, 2 years as a podcaster, as, a poet, and also, even as a guy that is a concert promoter now and film festival, showrunner and programming director. Like it's been one of those things that it's like, man, like I have people on the volunteer, like I wish I could pay them what they're worth. And there are some times where like I'll put podcasts out and edit them, and I'm just like, man, like I really hope this clicks with somebody, and like someone's like actually like understanding like what I'm putting out there. And it's really kind of nerve-wracking. Like I don't know how Mark and Billy feel, but as the guy that kind of does a little bit more of like the production side of a lot of those things, like it's one of those things, man. It's like, man, it's like it's sometimes like it can be hard, because anytime you put out art in the world, like there's a piece of you that's like naked and exposed, and it's like this is like vulnerable for me to share these things, like same goes for like reviewing as well. Like, I'm like, this filmmaker is never going to want to work with me again because like their film like didn't click with me, or, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Well, like love him or hate him, I mean, he's got plenty of problems, but I'm thinking about Tarantino a lot because I'm teaching a class right now on Tarantino. And he said that you should write something so personal to yourself that you're almost scared to show other people. And that resonates with me for sure. And actually somebody asked recently, like, how do I relate to like looky-loo, like this character? And I'm like, well, that's a terrifying question to answer, but because of what he does. But the filmmaking side of it, where he's like all by himself working on this project and like putting himself in danger to create his magnum opus, like I think I do really relate to that. And it does say some things about our own like psychosis trying to make these movies, or am I just insane?
No.
Yeah.
I've never made a movie, so I have absolutely no clue.
Well, I figure anything you could do is going to take something personal or something mental out of yourself just to be able to do it. Because if you can't think it through or do it, then it's got to take a piece of you to actually put something out there. And being the new guy here, I always worry about, okay, compared to those two, I don't have the same knowledge they do. So how do I sound when people listen to me? So
I recently, on the flip side of that, like doing something like this, whether that's podcasting, making films, making art, period, can be a mental health release. One of the things that I recently just covered a convention here in Richmond, and you can check it out right now. It's galaxyconvictimsandvillains.net. But one of the things that I would ask people is like, how does art affect your mental health? And they're like, honestly, like art allows me to escape mental health. It allows me to create something that's new. It allows me to be a reflection of how I'm feeling. So whether I'm drawing, writing, reading, researching, like I'm grieving. And I think about your own podcast journey, Billy, and where you were a year ago when we asked you to do, I think Crimes of the Future.
Yeah.
Crimes of the Future was the first one, and then we brought you back for Nope, and it just kind of seemed to be this like very reoccurring thing, and it just kind of seemed like there was like a confidence that was built in, but also at the same time that like this really also impacted your mental health for the better.
It actually did. It actually did. I was in a dark place at the time, and this was a way to open up and hang out with y'all. And of course, I've been friends with Mark for years, and I felt like I got another great friend with Josh now. So
it's tough with the filmmaking because I feel like I was just telling my fiance this yesterday. I feel like I'm probably at my happiest when I'm making something, when I'm like doing the new project. But then when you have to send it out into the world and things don't line up how you wanted them to line up, I wind up at my lowest. And with some therapy and with some medication, things have started to level out a little bit, which is nice. My dad always used to say, he's like one of my biggest supporters, but he's like, you got to stop beating yourself up. You got to start doing the Charlie Brown, the sky is falling kind of thing. But yeah, it can be tough. It can be really tough. I still struggle with it for sure.
Yeah. Damien didn't struggle as much as us, probably.
No. We need
to
to
very
absorb a little bit of that.
That one scene where you were talking about where he was walking through the park and the devil's here, already reborn and everything. I kind of compared it, not on purpose, but to looky-loo. It's kind of like you have no idea who's walking next to you, and you have no idea what they're capable of. He's literally standing there watching you talk about him.
Yeah, we really debated for a while. And ultimately, I think that we made the right first movie, but I think we shouldn't be surprised that it's a hard sell for some people. And one of the debates was, should he be interacting verbally with more people? Because then like a lot of found footage films, you hear constant dialogue, whether they're talking to the camera or they're filming somebody else and they're talking. And we did the opposite because our logic was, if he goes and talks to these people and it doesn't work out, or that person relays to somebody, this creepy guy with a camera talked to me, you're suddenly making it easier to be caught. So that's why our movie he's kind of just, he's a looky-loo. He's observant, even in the kill scenes, they go quick. He dispatches somebody quick. He's not talking to them or posing their body or anything like that. And so, yeah, that was a struggle. And I think that in part 2, it's going to start to feel a little more like the Omen, where you're getting more of like the backstory and what their motivations are as a killer and who the characters are that he's focusing on,
Yeah, excuse me. The lack of dialogue is interesting because they just had it back around Christmas. They had that movie on Hulu that came out, and I can't remember the name of it. It's a sci-fi alien abduction movie.
And
there's no dialogue in the whole movie.
No one's safe or something like that.
Yeah. There's no dialogue in the whole movie. It's essentially watching aliens try to abduct a girl.
Really?
That's like the whole movie. Yeah.
I have not seen. I thought you were talking about something else at first, but that I have not seen that.
Yeah, it's there haven't been a lot of movies with the lack of the lack of conversation, but the ones that have it end up being a little more interesting because they have to make up for it with the actual action and scenes and the way it's recorded to make it make more sense than just we have a bunch of people not talking.
Yeah, you'd be shocked, or maybe you guys wouldn't, but a lot of people would be shocked at how much work went into the sound design. Like, it's actually like a really complicated, robust sound design, but it's made to seem like it's what's like diegetic. So it's kind of crazy. I feel like people are like not going to appreciate the work that Casey did, but knowing all the work that he actually did on that, because a lot of times since I'm going around and filming these people kind of in their real settings, it was really difficult to like actually have somebody setting up with lights or sound. So sometimes all Casey had to go with was like a zoom hidden in the corner somewhere, and then what was recorded in camera, or he would have to recreate everything from the ground up. So yeah, he crushed it. It was his first time ever doing sound design on a feature. So very proud of it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, gents, is there can we talk about this abrupt ending real quick? And
Yeah, it just kind of stops.
There was
like-
an ending.
We're still talking about Omen 3 and not looky-loo, right?
yeah.
We're talking about Omen 3.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
it just he gets lightly poked with a knife, and then wanders, gives a speech, and falls over. It's like, oh, it's done.
And the
Yeah.
other kid is dead, right?
I'm guessing.
That's how I took it.
I mean, it seems like it, but just how they're carrying him, I'm
Yeah,
like,
he
is
took
there hope?
more? He took
Is he
more of
gonna
the
be
knife than
reborn?
Sam Neill did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you because it's like, is there hope? Is there going to be a rebirth? Because the priest had told the mother, we can save him. And I'm like, okay, are they saying they can bring him back to life? Is that what's going to happen here?
So I thought the end, like I stopped, I paused the ending quote. I thought was interesting. Behold the Line of Judah, the Messiah who came as a child, but returns not as a child, but as the King of Kings to rule power and glory. I don't know, man. I thought that was like such a weird like juxtaposition to like have right there at the end where they're like, there's this glorious light that has now also been like the sign of like the Antichrist being dead. And it's just like, this is such a weird, like specific thing to like put here at the end. Like, I don't know. I think some of the other scripture that we've gotten in the part 2 and 3 like would have been like more fitting, where like it actually talks about like this like great battle that's going to happen between like the Messiah and the devil. And again, just this movie just makes weird narrative choices.
Yeah, it almost seemed like somebody in the background was like, I'm going to fund this movie, but only if you do this. And you end up with this weird ending.
Yeah. This go ahead, Billy.
I was going to say, and what kills me is the whole time, all 3 movies, is you got to get them with all these knives. You got to stab them with all the knives. Again, all the knives.
And they only got him with one.
So that completely killed that whole storyline of it's got to be all 7 knives when they hit him with only one, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, we got him."
Yeah.
They kind of they must have forgot about the other 6.
Maybe this movie was made in the early 80s, and there's still there are elements of it that feel very timely. Like there's a portion of it where like there's a scene in which Damien is offered to be like be like a high like politician or whatever, and he's like meeting with the diplomat, and he's meeting with the guy, and he's like, well, you know, I have these reservations because, you know, I don't want to give up my position at the Thorn. And he's like, you know, it's against the law, and he's like, we can just bend the law. And it feels like we haven't learned anything in 40 plus years, where like we still hear stories of like politicians and diplomats and like people that are like of high authority or like influence, like still going after this. And this hurts my mental health. I'll just put that out there.
Well, you did catch that it's the same position that his dad had in the first one.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, it was the exact same diplomatic position.
History repeats itself in glorious and unknown ways.
But he was never really a politician in this movie.
No, that's
Yeah.
like
So they kind of skipped that whole he'll come from politics. It's like,
Yeah.
what?
that's the thing that like bothers me so much, and like
It's like I feel like this movie had the potential to be the best of the three,
yes,
but too many people got in the way with stupid ideas.
they were just like yeah, we don't need this idea of him coming from politics, and like they kind of like tease it with like that diplomat position, and then they're like, you know what? No,
Screw it.
let's have him fight a baby. You know, sold. All right. Well, we are one step closer to finishing the Omen series, but you guys can once again catch Looky-loo, a part of the Horrific Hope Film Festival when it comes to the Alamo in Winchester, Virginia. It is going to be headlining our Incommodus block, which is Latin for uncomfortable. Along with that, you guys are going to have the East Coast premiere of the Spanish short In Your Head, the world premiere of Eat Me, and the Virginia premiere of Not Him. Tickets are currently on sale now. We'll provide a link in the show notes below. But Mr. Zink, where can we find you online?
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. I'm not very active on social media, but we do have TikTok for Weird on Top pictures. We've got Instagram. Facebook's probably the easiest way to find me. You can just find me, Jason Zink, and we also have a Weird on Top pictures page. Feel free to send a message. I'm pretty easy to reach.
Don't feel bad. I'm not very active on social media either.
It's true.
It's turned into a joke.
It's a running joke here now.
Yeah.
And
You
Mark,
know,
what is your social media?
You can look at my unupdated Instagram of old models that I painted a couple years ago because I haven't posted any new ones anytime recently. But titanium juggernaut painting on Instagram. Yeah.
And you can find me at WTaber3 on Facebook.
Slacker.
You guys, before I give out my social media and all of our social media, we do want to thank our sponsors for this year's Horrific Hope Film Festival: Fierce Literature, Coven Salon, Worlds Away, Escape, and 10 Top Art, all of which you guys can find links for all of their stuff in the show notes below. They are all incredible people with incredible stories and causes and art and everything else. But you guys can find me. I am on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia, and you guys can find us Abyss Gazing wherever you guys get your podcast from, and also follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you guys get your podcast from, Patreon, and YouTube. So until next time, remember, the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.